those things get covered. But it always starts with this idea. You know, this job requires you to be in a certain frame of mind to do these things. If you're going to prevent accidents regardless of conditions, regardless of the actions of others, if you're going to be able to go home at the end of the day, right, and be safe, go home, enjoy your evening, it's going to require you to come to work cool, calm, and in control. This job requires people who are cool, calm, and in control, not tired and angry, but cool, calm, and in control. So, being well rested, being free of alcohol, prescription or non-prescription drugs is particularly important. Having your emotions under control, making sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you're getting proper rest. You know, this job requires you to come out and do it to a high level of perfection, making sure that you live a lifestyle, if you would, that supports the work that you do. You can't be going home and just probably throwing down a six-pack every night. It won't work for long. Even though you might pass a test the next day, you know that your brain's not functioning at full capacity, and you need your brain to function at full capacity. And then also distractions. Not only the obvious distractions, we talked about these a little bit, but a lot of things that are going on in here. You know, you've got to put aside when you're doing this job problems you have at home, financial problems, relationship problems, kid problems, right? Maybe even health problems. Because it requires a great deal of effort to do this job safely each and every day. It really does. A friend of mine, Andy Irving, used to tell a wonderful story about this, that he drove in Akron, Ohio when he first started in this line of work. He was a bus driver there. You remember Andy, one of the Deer Street man, God rest his soul. And he was driving, returning the bus at the end of the day, and as he pulled into the bus garage, he actually hit two buses that were parked. Now, when you hit buses that are parked, that's a problem. And people notice it. You know, not a big damage, just a little scrape alongside of the buses. But he knew he was in trouble. So it happened to be late Friday. Dispatcher said, Andy, there's nobody here. All the supervisors are gone. They'll talk to you Monday. Don't worry about it. Well, what do you think he did all week? He worried about it, right? So he gets there Monday morning, and as soon as he sees his boss, he starts explaining to his boss how it wasn't his fault. That there's light outside in the dark, and it's too dark inside the garage, and you don't see when you first went in, and the buses were parked where they should have been parked. And the guy said, whoa, Andy, please stop. Let me tell you what happened. You went home before you parked your bus. That's what happened. Everybody get that, right? And that's what I'm saying to all of you. Don't go home before you park your bus. You know, that last bit of the day, you're thinking about dinner, you're thinking about what you got to do that evening, you're thinking about stopping at the store on your way home to pick up milk, whatever the case may be. Do your job, get it done, and then go home. Leave work at work, home at home. But boy, when you're trying to do this, when you're trying to overlap the two of them, that's when we tend to get into trouble. We all do. We're going to talk a little bit about this concept of defensive driving called SCC, scanning, cushion of safety, and communicating. That's what you're doing all day long as you're driving. You're scanning, right? You're looking all around you. You're creating this cushion of safety around you, and then you're constantly communicating information to other people. And we'll watch a little video on it if you want to get ready, Suzanne.
Session 2, Scanning, Cushion of Safety, and Communicating. In this session, you will be introduced to 3 critical concepts that will help you drive your van more safely and stay out of collision-producing situations. We will refer to these as SCC, S for scanning, C for cushion of safety, and C for communicating. Scanning refers to looking all around your van, in front, to both sides, and to the rear. Cushion of safety refers to the area around your van that you should try to keep clear of other motorists, pedestrians, and fixed objects. Communication is another critical factor to consider that can help you stay out of trouble. Think about how you can communicate with other motorists and pedestrians. Some examples are use of headlights, positioning your van, use of directional signals and running lights, etc. Let's break down some of these concepts and see how they might work on the road. First is the area to the front of the van, the area over which driver safety specialists say we have the most control. As a general rule, in ideal conditions with dry paved roadway, You should try to stay at least 4 seconds behind any vehicle directly ahead. To check your following distance, pick out a stationary object, such as the overpass. As the vehicle in front goes under the overpass, begin counting. If you can count to 1004 before reaching the overpass, you are maintaining at least a 4-second following distance. You may be thinking a 4-second following distance is way too much, but you will probably change your mind when you understand how your total stopping distance is calculated. Your total stopping distance is determined by 3 major factors. The first is perception distance, the distance your van travels from the time you spot a problem until you recognize the problem as a hazard requiring your action. Average perception time is approximately 1 3/4 of a second. The second is reaction distance, the distance your van travels while you move your foot from the accelerator to depress the brake. Average reaction time is about 3/4 of a second. The third is braking distance, the distance your van travels from the time you begin braking until your van comes to a complete stop. These distances make up your total stopping distance. However, there are many variables that affect your van's total stopping distance, including the van's size and weight. For example, your van may even decrease or increase weight depending on how many passengers and/or how much cargo you may be transporting. Because of this, the weight of the same van on any given day may change as you go through the day. Other variables include the type and condition of the road surface, the condition of the brakes and tires, and the driver's physical condition and reaction time. Any charts you may see regarding total stopping distances are not precise because of these variables. If a driver is involved in a collision and that driver says, "I couldn't stop in time," that driver failed to compensate for these variables. Your understanding of following distance is critical to controlling your van. When conditions are not ideal, such as with poor traction or visibility, increase your following distance. Depending on your schedule, you may not be able to postpone your trip. If you must drive, be proactive and take these adverse weather conditions into account and adjust your driving accordingly. Slow down and increase your following distance. Now let's look at another area that requires scanning, the sides and to the rear of your van. Even with properly adjusted seat and mirrors, it may still be difficult to spot vehicles in your blind spots. You can increase your sight angle by leaning a bit in your seat and checking your mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds. These techniques will help you spot other vehicles moving into your side blind spots. Checking your mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds will also help you spot vehicles moving into a tailgate position. Once a tailgater is behind your van, you may not be able to detect a tailgater, especially if the back window is blocked by cargo or equipment. If you have a tailgater, increase your following distance. By doing so, you and the tailgater will have more room to slow or stop when faced with a hazard ahead. Earlier, we mentioned that average reaction time is 3/4 of a second. Using 3/4 of a second as reaction time, if your van were traveling at 30 miles per hour, your van would travel 33 feet before you even hit the brakes. A technique to reduce your reaction time is to cover the brake, not braking, but placing your foot over the brake. Covering the brake will reduce your reaction distance, thereby reducing your total stopping distance. Scanning, maintaining a cushion of safety, and communicating with others will help keep you collision-free. Keep in mind the National Safety Council's definition of a preventable collision. They define it as one in which the driver failed to do everything reasonable to avoid it. This concept implies that you should do everything within your control to prevent a collision, even if another driver's actions are inappropriate. Coaching reminder point: scan ahead and cover the brake to avoid panic braking.
In that video, when they had that destination of Noel July, mentioned about determining between that should have the eastward presentability. And that's a word that you all fall. We don't ask who's fall. We ask what's the present. Because of you doing things that were lessons in likelihood of something bad happening. So, for example, following this is something that were those three things they talked about. Following that cushion of safety around you, giving adequate signals to others, doing a proper pre-trip inspection, maintaining a proper speed, maintaining a proper cushion, checking your mirrors, covering your brake. That's what we expect from professional drivers. Not what everybody else out there is doing, driving as fast as they can, getting to the next place as quick as they can, tailgating everybody, pulling out in front of people. We don't expect that from you. We expect something different from you. Here's one thing I often tell professional drivers. I've been in this business now a long time, over 40 years, believe it or not. I started when I was 4. So it's a long time ago. Here's something, and I've visited hundreds and hundreds of transportation organizations. I've never heard of anybody being fired for being late. Ever. I'm not saying nobody talks. No, I won't say that. That's all. I wouldn't be too statement. What do people get fired for? A lot of people lose their jobs, drivers. Right. Accidents, right? Not doing what they should be doing, right? Getting into shouting matches with people, being rude, nasty, sarcastic. Those are the things that people lose their jobs for. You're not going to lose your job because you're running 10 minutes late, because you did all this stuff right. Don't get, and everybody hear what I'm saying. You're not going to lose your job because you pull into the office 10 minutes past what was on your schedule. When you say, hey, traffic was bad, weather was bad, I was following a truck, this lady that I picked up using a walk was slow, you're going to have reasons why you were late. Nobody's going to fire you for that. But if you violate these rules, then you risk the chance of losing your job. We don't want that to happen. They talked about these basic things. Remember, either accelerating or braking. It's going to take more time in the bus, right? You're going to have to start out slower, you're going to have to stop slower. Besides the obvious weight, what else is against you? What's inside your vehicle? Passengers, right? And high-risk passengers are that. A lot of older people, people with disabilities, people with hidden disabilities, people with medical conditions, etc., etc. So you don't want to be jerking people, either stopping or starting out, right? You want to do things smoothly to make it a comfortable ride for people and a safe ride. Steering, remember getting your hands not at 2 and 10 as you were taught when you were a little kid, but down here at 9 and 3 or even below that. Why? Why don't we teach people to do this anymore? Or worse yet, do this when they're driving. That airbag goes off, your forearm's going to be shattered. You're going to be in the hospital, in surgery, and they're going to be trying to mend 6 broken bones. And by the way, that's happening to people. You're in the habit of driving with your forearm over the steering wheel. Maybe you learned that 30 years ago. It's a hard thing to break. If that airbag goes off, first thing that's going to happen is your arm's going to shatter, then your fist is going to punch you right between the eyes. And you're probably going to be knocking yourself out. Literally. You've got to get your hands over here. Braking. The other thing, remember, ABS brakes, which I'm assuming most of these vehicles have automatic braking systems. You probably were taught that to on and off, right? On and off your brake, keep it from skidding. Now what are we going to do? Constant, steady pressure. Let the computer. But here's the thing about ABS brakes. It doesn't mean you'll stop quickly. It may actually take more time. Why? Because the brake's being released. You might notice that if you're ever driving in rain, if you're ever driving in a little bit of ice or snow, you put the brakes on and you'll feel it pulsating, right? And that's it's releasing it to keep you from skidding. The problem is it may take you longer to stop. So you've got to adjust for that as well. Signaling and turning, we talked about that. Remember, your signals are there to give other people information, not to give you information. You know you're turning right or left at the next intersection. What you're trying to do is help that person know what you're doing. So again, don't give out signals that give wrong information. Oh, I put my signal on 300 yards back here, right? 300 feet back here, because I'm turning right. But meanwhile, I'm going past 2 roads in a parking lot with all these pullouts, and I'm sending the wrong signal to everybody as I'm doing that. And then finally, just a moment on railroad crossings. I say it simply, trains always win. 100% of the time. You have no reason to be a train. If the signal's on, if the gates are down, if the lights are flashing, if the horn's blowing, what do you got to do? You got to stop and let the train go. Too often, in buses particularly, including school buses, at least once a year, you'll hear some tragic accident that somebody wanted to beat a train so they could get home 3 minutes earlier to watch the first part of Jeopardy or something. I don't know. But again, nobody would redo that once this bad thing happens. But boy, when a train hits a vehicle, trains win. They really do. Backing, we touched on that a little bit, right? You know, don't let this happen. If you're going to back up, what do you got to do? You got to go out and look. You got to make sure there's nothing back there. And again, getting out of your vehicle and walking behind it, and then going back and getting back in. How much time is that going to take? 10 seconds, 15 seconds? At the end of the day, that's not going to matter. But if you back over a small child, your day will never be the same. When I think of that poor grandfather in my neighborhood that backed over his grandson, and that's a true story behind it. What he would give to change that 15 seconds. It's hard to grasp what he would give to change that 15 seconds. I don't care where he was going next, you would change that 15 seconds. And you don't want that to be you. Finally, intersections. You know, we talked about it before that intersections are the most dangerous place you drive each day. About 50% of all accidents take place in intersections. So anytime you're coming to an intersection, you want to slow down, you want to be scanning, and if necessary, getting your foot over on top of that brake so that you're... Now, what do most people do? You think about how most people drive. If they see the light turn yellow, what do? They speed up, right? They got to get through that light. What do you got to do? Slow down and stop at that light. You've got to approach it because you want to prevent accidents regardless of the conditions, regardless of the accident. But, you know, you look at an intersection like this one and you go, ooh, that looks dangerous. But I'll bet you that one doesn't. That intersection, I could drive around. If I had a little plane, I could fly over this community and find hundreds of versions of what you're looking at out there. But what you're looking at there is the site of the worst transportation accident in the last 10 years in the United States took place in that intersection. That little rural intersection in upstate New York is where 20 people died. Because a bus was coming down this road, this little side road. They're going to refer to it as a limousine in the video, but it was a stretch vehicle, body on chassis vehicle, not all that different than what you drive. And there's one stop sign right here. And for some reason, this driver didn't see it. Now you think, oh, he got hit. Nope. He didn't get hit by anything. He got through there. The problem was when he came into this parking lot, there were two gentlemen standing here talking. He hit both of them. They were killed on the spot. And then it went into a ravine that's down between these trees, and everybody in the vehicle was killed, including the driver. Now, on a Saturday morning, taking people for a day out to celebrate a birthday. And on Monday morning, on the Today Show at 7 a.m., remember what I said at the beginning of this? You know, you can say whatever you want about me on that eval. It's not going to be on the Today Show on Monday morning. But if something bad enough happens, we don't want it to happen. We should be watching this.
This is the worst fatal accident involving transportation in nearly 10 years since a plane crash in Buffalo. Behind me, these are the rut marks, the drag marks where they had to pull that SUV out of the ravine and the creek. This was a high-impact crash. Witnesses say they believe, in fact, that this limo may have been speeding as it blew through a stop sign and slammed at a high rate of speed right into that creek and ravine. On a quiet country road in upstate New York, a gut-wrenching tragedy. 20 fatalities is just horrific. The horror transmitted in the voices of emergency responders first on the scene. The question everyone here is asking, how did an SUV limousine headed to a birthday party on Saturday plow through this intersection, taking the lives of 20 people?
18 of the victims were in the limousine, including the driver.
Witnesses say the van came tearing right down that road and blew through that stop sign. There are no skid marks to be seen here on the driveway. He tore right through the Apple Barrel Cafe's driveway, hitting and killing two pedestrians here before careening right into the ravine.
I wanted to see it, and I wanted to say goodbye to them.
Barbara Douglas lost 4 of her nieces in the crash, all sisters. She says 3 of their husbands were also killed. One of the sisters, Amy Steenberg, seen here at her wedding last June. Her husband, Axel, rented the limo for her 30th birthday party.
They did the responsible thing, getting a limo so they wouldn't be driving.
NTSB Chief Robert Sunwalt.
This is absolutely the most deadly transportation crash or accident that we've seen in this country since 2009.
2009 was the year a Colgan Air flight crashed into a house near Buffalo, killing 50. According to records obtained from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, now NTSB investigators are combing through thick underbrush and examining the wreckage of this horrific crash. Among the questions, was there a mechanical failure? How were the road conditions? And questions about the driver. Distracted driving, whether he was intoxicated, whether the brakes failed, all of that's on the table?
Everything is on the table.
The biggest question, how did a day of happiness turn into such a heartbreaking tragedy? And to underscore the gravity here, we believe now that at least 3 children have been left orphans because their parents were killed in this horrific crash. Guys, back to you.
It's just so hard to even fathom, Tom. Have you had a chance to reach out to the limousine company? Has it come out with a statement or anything?
We did talk to the limousine company last night. They declined to comment beyond saying that this is an absolute tragedy, but they would refer us to the NTSB for comment.
And Tom, what about that intersection? Is there something about it? Has it been known to be especially dangerous?
Yeah, it is kind of a strange, it's a T, if you will. So if you come down that hill and then you hit this street, which is right behind the camera, if you don't hit the stop sign in time, or if you're not paying attention, you can blow right through the stop sign and essentially come right towards me. And that's what we apparently saw happen yesterday, where that car came Saturday rather, barreling right into this ravine. And witnesses here say this has happened before, but never have they seen fatal injuries like this before.
It's just a tragedy. Tom, thank you so much.
Now, it's not easy to watch that. I don't think anybody in the room wants to watch that, including me. The other thing I would tell you is, again, I would guess that this company was not what's any longer in the yard out that morning for that long. With that big line. You can see with one mistake, regardless of how it happened. Now, we do know some things we didn't know. This case is still being figured out. We do know one thing. We know that the vehicle that he was driving did not pass inspection. But they, in fact, took it someplace else that did pass it. There was genuinely a brake problem. And whether that was fixed or not, nobody's quite sure. We also know the gentleman who was driving the bus was not properly licensed. But he did not have a CDL, and this required a CDL. But we also know some other things. He wasn't under the influence of drugs or alcohol. That test is relatively easy to do. And it may take years before everybody knows exactly what happened. And I show it to you to remind you, again, if I had an airplane to fly around these counties that I'm in right now, I could find 50 versions of that intersection. There's nothing unusual about that intersection. And again, we tend to think of intersections like this, oh, that's where the bad accidents happen. This is rural upstate New York, no different than where we're at here in West Virginia. Worst accident in the transportation industry. No plane, no train has exceeded the number of deaths in a small vehicle accident in upstate New York. So again, I only show that to remind you what you do each day is difficult and potentially dangerous. Don't take for granted this defensive driving stuff. We have already talked about following distance, perception plus reaction plus braking. Remember the 4-second rule. That's incredibly important. You get used to creating that cushion of safety between you and vehicles in front of you. That gives you more time. It gives you more time to react. It gives you more time to scan. It gives you more time to check your mirrors. This is not how most people drive. All you got to do is on your way home tonight, just pay attention. Most people are tailgating each other. You know, you go to Pittsburgh in the morning, and once you've been to Pittsburgh at some point, so you know about the Squirrel Hill Tunnel or the Fort Pitt Tunnel. And just about every time you're going in the morning, as bad as the delay is anyway, there's going to be another delay because there's been a rear-end accident. And it all comes down to this idea. People simply want to get that cushion of safety. They've done experiments at the Squirrel Hill Tunnel in the middle of the night. They'll line up 12 cars, and they create a 4-second distance between them. They can go through those tunnels at 60 miles an hour. The problem is when everybody's tailgating, everybody, as they approach the tunnel, what's the natural thing to do? Tap the brake, right? Then all the cars tailgating, what do they got to do? Tap, 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 tap. And back in Monroeville, somebody stopped. Next car goes in, tap, 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 tap. Back in, in Green Tree, somebody has to, you get where I'm going with that. But if everybody would get that cushion of safety, they would just keep moving through those tunnels. It's one of those interesting things. It's not road design, it's people design that needs to change, and you can't be part of that. Just some things, don't speed, don't tailgate, be particularly cautious on expressways, although the number of accidents on expressways are actually less. If you look at miles traveled, actually rural roads, where most of you work, is where the highest number of fatalities per mile travel takes place. There are some special considerations on expressways because of speed. When you do hear about an accident on an expressway, it's usually a bad accident, simply because the speed was much higher. You know what happens when two vehicles, if I'm going 50 miles an hour, and I hit a vehicle going 50 miles an hour, what was the impact speed? 100 miles an hour. Literally. So as speed increases, if something bad happens, the net result is much worse as well. You know, I hit a deer at almost 65 miles an hour, $14,000 damage, all the airbags went off. I would hit that same deer at 30 miles an hour, I don't think those things would have happened. Same deers, but everything else changed after. And that deer jumped on my hood, by the way. And it was at night, and to some degree, my first reaction was, I couldn't have done anything about it, except one thing. What's that? I could have been going 55 miles an hour. And maybe, just maybe, I would have saw that deer. Even though I'd like to say, well, I didn't have anything to do with it, but just maybe I would have caught it before it was in front of me. Just maybe. That little extra half a second, quarter of a second, that would have gave me, just maybe I would have. Smooth operation, remember you're transporting passengers, you're not transporting cargo. You know, again, even the passengers you transport tend to be higher risk people by nature. Older people, people with disabilities, people with medical conditions. Often that's the very reason they're riding your bus. So you've got a higher risk group of people to begin with. And by the way, we got together before the break, and starting Monday, you only have to pick up the knife. Didn't you tell me that, no? That's what it does. Doug said that, and then Suzanne said that you only got to pick up the ones that smell good. No, you didn't say that. You didn't say that. No, think about it. I'm not making light. Who do we pick up? Who do you pick up? Everybody, right? Some people that are very nice and very easy to deal with, and frankly, some people that are very much a challenge that you've got to deal with. But to some degree, that's the very nature of the job. That's not going to change. No, we're picking everybody up Monday too, even the ones that don't smell after that. Your job is to have yourself under control. Your job is to have good customer relations. Your job is to drive defensively. Your job is to go home and be safe and enjoy your evening. That's what you've got to embrace as sort of the calling of this job, or it's going to be extremely difficult. We talked about blind spots. Remember adjusting your mirrors out and up, reducing this blind spot as much as possible. Be aware of other people's blind spots. If you can't see the mirrors of a big vehicle in front of you, or if you can't see the rearview mirror of a car in front of you, you're probably in your blind spot. Check your mirrors often. They say 3 to 5 seconds. That seems a little bit like a lot to me. But nothing should ever sneak up on you. If you find all of a sudden, oh, where'd that vehicle come from? Where'd that motorcycle come from? Where'd that car behind you come from? That's an indicator you're not checking your mirrors often enough. If you find yourself wondering where that came from, it didn't show up out of the sky. It was there, and you didn't pay attention enough. So pay attention to that. Okay, we're going to play another short little video on defensive driving. And I apologize again, but these are necessary for us to qualify you. So that's the nature of these. Are you ready, Suzanne?
Session 3. Reading traffic situations, Part 1. When driving in congested areas with heavy traffic, traffic lights, busy intersections, pedestrians, parked and double parked vehicles, other motorists changing lanes, etc., it is not easy to scan, maintain a cushion of safety, and effectively communicate. Experienced van drivers have learned to scan the area ahead to spot potential problems. How far ahead? In the city, it is recommended that you scan about 12 to 15 seconds ahead, or 1 to 1.5 blocks. This will give you time to communicate by adjusting your lane position if an upcoming situation warrants it. For example, there is a double parked delivery truck in the right lane. Spotting the problem early allows you to start checking for a break in traffic so you can change lanes at the first opportunity. Your scanning also spots the brake lights of the vehicle parked at the corner, and his pushing out does not catch you off guard. You are also aware of the white van backing into a parking space on your left. Your long-distance scan picked up these hazards, and you were able to adjust your driving to minimize the problems. Usually, when drivers hear the term blind spots, they think of their own vehicle's blind spots. However, experienced van drivers have learned that other drivers' blind spots can also be a problem. They use a technique to detect whether or not they are in another driver's blind spot. As a general rule, If you can't see the other driver's inside rearview mirror, that is a clue that you may be in that driver's blind spot. If that driver has clothes hanging or passengers seated in a way that blocks the inside rearview mirror, that driver can't see you. Adjust your position or your speed to get out of the other driver's blind spot. Even in less congested environments, don't focus on any single hazard. On the right, the front wheels of the minivan are turned out. Is there a driver behind the wheel? Farther down the street, the sport utility vehicle is angle parking. Are there backup lights of any of the other vehicles on? Remember, when angle parked, the driver's view of oncoming traffic is blocked by the other parked vehicles, and the driver will have to start backing to get a better view. Move a little to the left of your lane, keeping some space on the left since the oncoming traffic is next to the center lines. Did you spot the backup lights of the red car inching out of the parking space so the driver can get a better view of oncoming traffic? But don't focus on only one hazard. Are these other parked cars starting to back out? Did you notice the oncoming driver on your left who suddenly stopped? Why did the driver stop? There can be multiple hazards in any environment. Regarding jaywalkers, you may be tempted to stop and wave a jaywalker across in front of you. Don't do it. You can't control the actions of other drivers approaching from both directions. Drivers behind you may not realize why you have stopped and may decide to pass you right into the path of the jaywalker. Of course, if pedestrians are in a crosswalk situation, you must follow state or local requirements. As you enter a block, check the status of the upcoming traffic light. This will help you scan and plan for potential problems at the upcoming intersection. If the light is green when you enter the block, anticipate that it may change by the time you get there, and move your foot over the brake to slow your van. By checking the light ahead, you will have a clue about when the light might change. If the light turns red, you can avoid sudden braking by slowing gradually, well before the crosswalk. When stopping at an intersection, stop before the stop line. If you find that you have stopped beyond the stop line, don't back up. Pedestrians may be crossing behind your van, or a car may have stopped close to the rear of your van. If you stop behind another vehicle, stop far enough behind so you can see the other vehicle's rear tires and a bit of pavement. In a van that does not have a protruding hood, you will have to judge the distance. In this position, you will have room to move around the vehicle if necessary without backing up. Let's look at this situation. As you approach the intersection, you spot a parked vehicle's backup lights. As the parked vehicle continues to back, you cover your brake. The vehicle ahead is forced to stop just across the intersection. By anticipating the hazard, you are able to stop safely before the intersection to wait for the situation ahead to clear. If you are turning right at the intersection, signal well in advance of the turn. Most states require signaling at least 100 feet before your turn. However, be aware that your signal may be confusing to others. For example, you may be turning right at the upcoming intersection. But in this case, there is an entry road into a shopping area on the right before the intersection. The driver waiting to exit might cut in front of you, thinking that you are turning into the shopping area. Another driver could cut in front of you to enter the shopping area, and a vehicle from behind could cut you off to make a right turn at the intersection. And there is another entrance exit even closer to the intersection. Covering the brake and scanning ahead and behind are critical to driving defensively in this situation. In this situation, the driver prepares for the right turn by signaling early, slowing and moving to the right. As the driver makes the turn, she scans ahead and spots a tow truck that has stopped in the road. Because her view of the road is blocked, she stops and waits until she can see that the road is clear. Only then does she signal, check mirrors, and move around the tow truck. Making a left turn across a traffic lane is a dangerous maneuver, one that results in a high percentage of collisions. Try to avoid making left turns if possible, and try to plan your route to avoid these situations. If you must wait for oncoming traffic to clear, wait with your front wheels straight ahead. Don't turn them to the left in anticipation of the turn. If another vehicle were to hit you from behind, you could be pushed into oncoming traffic. And when turning left, if you have a choice of 2 designated left turn lanes, choose the lane to the right. In this position, you will keep other vehicles out of your right blind spot, and you will be able to track vehicles on the left. Coaching reminder point: keep your speed down. Traveling over 50 miles per hour while on curved roadways increases your chance of rollover.
Now, there's endless information in there about different things. One of the few things I didn't touch on was making pedestrians in front of you. Why do we want to do that? If you're being a nice guy, a nice gal, you want to do it to be nice. Why don't we want to do that? People like that. Right. We only control us. We don't control anybody behind us, anybody coming the other direction. I was showing this video many years ago in the transportation system, and sort of got to this point, the guy said, I have to tell you all a story. I said, yeah, if you don't mind sharing it. He said, I almost killed a woman on Saturday. He said, I was driving Saturday mornings. I like driving Saturday mornings, a lot less traffic, taking my time, and I make this right turn. And he said the intersection that people move now. And he said, I see this couple jogging, and I could tell they wanted to, cross in front of me. Guy jogging, gal right behind him. So I just wave him across, right? I sort of halfway through the intersection and I stop. And the guy starts running in front of me, and the door passes him. And then all of a sudden I feel a horn. And some guy zooming up the left side, giving me the finger. Except the problem is, looking at the timing, she's going to step out right in front of that car. And the guy hears it, the other guy jogging, he grabs her by the back of the shirt and pulls her back, and the car goes whizzing by. He said, I would have killed that one. Just trying to be a nice guy.
You're responsible. When you
right.
tell them to go, you're responsible.
You hear what he's saying? When you tell someone to go, you're taking on that responsibility, and you have no control over it. They don't know what you're doing. That guy who blew the horn, gave him the finger, where was his view? Why is this guy stopping me, right? So he had a whole other view, you're right. And he said, and it was a good story to tell in front of the group. Here's a guy who went to that I almost now bitten, good, right? The other thing was the left turn thing. That may have sounded funny too. Well, the data now says we've been looking at pedestrian hits for a long time. Pedestrian, unfortunately, in many cases, fatality. About 2 times as many pedestrian strikes and pedestrian fatalities happen on left turns rather than and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. There's a lot of different combinations of blind spots that take place on a left turn. Right turn, you sort of have a good view of everything. Left side, you don't see things coming in from behind you. And remember, the person walking might be doing this. Down we are Marshall University. What town? Huntington. Down in Huntington 2 years ago, they had a pedestrian killed that just got off a bus, hit by a moving train. Think about that. Now, about 100 feet from the back door, she went out the back door at dusk. The problem was she had earbuds in and she was texting her daughter. And people were yelling, stop, stop, stop. And she walked right in front of the slow-moving train. And she was killed on the spot with about 30 witnesses. Not a pretty thing to see. The driver actually pulled away. The transportation company didn't even know till the next day that she was on the bus. And then, of course, the family sued them as well. Fortunately, the judge threw that out that they weren't responsible. But, we live in a day and age in which people are doing what people are doing. Very sad story, but, you've got to be aware of that and use all of your senses to be aware of that. Okay, we're going to look at one more traffic situation. And then this will be the last one of the ones we must show. You ready?
Session 4, Reading Traffic Situations, Part 2. Highway driving may not seem as complex as city driving, but the high speeds raise the stakes considerably. In addition to the necessities of scanning, keeping a cushion of safety, and communicating, there are additional defensive driving skills and techniques you can use to reduce your chances of a highway collision. One of the most hazardous highway situations occurs when drivers attempt to merge onto a highway. When on an entrance ramp without a control light, maintain a safe following distance when there is a vehicle ahead. This will give you space to maneuver should the driver in front slow or stop. give you time to scan across traffic lanes, and give you enough room to accelerate as you merge. Once the vehicle in front merges, use your mirrors, lean in your seat, and check across multiple lanes for vehicles that might be cutting in front of you. Once on the highway, remember to establish and maintain a cushion of safety as soon as possible. In highway driving situations, scan the area 12 to 15 seconds ahead, which is approximately a quarter of a mile. Your long-distance scan will allow you to spot signs, overpasses, and lighted signs that indicate upcoming interchanges. As you approach an interchange, check your mirrors and blind spots for drivers who might cut in front of you to exit or to avoid merging traffic. Also scan the area to determine the safest lane to use as you pass the entry and exit areas. You should be aware of the move over law. This means if you see an emergency vehicle with lights on at the side of the road, you should move over one lane. Anytime you change lanes, signal, check mirrors, lean in your seat, and check over your shoulder for other vehicles. If you cannot move over safely, you should slow to approximately 20 miles per hour until you pass the emergency vehicle. In addition, if you decide to change lanes, either to pass or in this case because of an upcoming hazard on the right, begin by checking your mirror and leaning in your seat to broaden your sight angle. If all is clear, signal and check again. If all is clear, move into the center lane. If you are driving in the middle lane on the highway, you must continually scan your mirrors to watch for a potential pinch point situation. That is, when vehicles on both sides pass you at the same time and try to pull into your lane. By scanning your mirrors, you are ready and can cover the brake, allowing your van to gradually slow. This provides an extra margin of safety in front. If you will be exiting a highway, you should know ahead of time the exact location of your exit. This will help you avoid having to make a last-minute lane change and will help ensure a safe, comfortable ride for your passengers. As you approach your exit, signal well in advance. Check both mirrors to spot drivers behind you who may try to cut in front to exit. Slow and move into your exit lane as soon as it is clear. And keep your speed down on the exit ramp. These speeds are posted for cars and may be too fast for a taller vehicle such as your van with its higher center of gravity. Two-lane roadways have their own special hazards, such as poor road shoulders with drop-offs or no shoulders at all, trees and telephone poles, as well as oncoming traffic only one lane over, all of which make it difficult to find an escape lane in case the unexpected happens. In addition, the heavy vegetation combined with sharp curves and crests of hills can obstruct your view of the road ahead. In conditions like these, where you can't scan far down the road, cover the brake and be ready to slow quickly should a hazard appear with little warning. Here, your scanning picks up the Hidden Drives sign and the traffic cone near the curve. Cover your brake to further reduce your speed. As you round the curve and spot the road maintenance ahead, reduce your speed still further, braking if necessary. Scan past the area and proceed slowly only when you are sure it is clear. On rural roads, not only are your visibility and maneuverability restricted, but you often must share narrow roads with other motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. But don't let your attention become fixated on the obvious hazards and lose track of changing conditions, such as the partially obstructed pedestrian crossing warning sign and the pedestrian suddenly moving onto the right side of the road. Gravel roads require special attention. The loose road surface, combined with the ruts and washboard surface, substantially reduces traction and increases braking distances. Also, gravel roads are often very narrow, with no shoulders or escape routes. These factors, combined with a restricted view of the road ahead, in this case caused by the hill and heavy vegetation, require that you reduce your speed. Coaching reminder point. Fatal rollovers are more likely to involve tire failure.
I don't know why they threw that in at the very end of that. That's You know, you drive in all three of those conditions. Again, if I was a bus driver in downtown Pittsburgh, I pretty much drive those conditions every day. And those have special concerns too, don't get me wrong. But I think in many ways you've got more of a challenge. You might be driving at high road speeds on a limited access highway, you know, outside of Moorfield. Then you may be on a 2-lane road going through a town or on a country road with no berm. And then frankly, going into somebody's area to pick them up, you may be on a very much a narrow back road. What they're trying to say is your job as a professional driver is what? You've got actions regardless of those conditions and regardless of the actions of others. Making adjustments for each one of those conditions. Merging in on and off a highway is a high-risk area because anytime, it's sort of like an intersection, but it's going straight. One of the unique hazards you often find is you're trying to get off the highway, meaning you're going to slow down to hit an exit. Meanwhile, that same entry ramp is the speed-up lane for somebody trying to get on that highway. That's a particularly precarious situation that you're in. Pay very close and special attention. Don't get into that with I have the right of way argument. That'll be great when you're in a T-zone accident. You can have that argument after that. Your job is to prevent actions regardless of what they do. Not because, quote, I have the right of way. Get past that argument. Same thing to a yield sign. Yes, you're allowed to go, they should stop. Maybe they won't. You have to be thinking in those terms. You're trying to prevent actions regardless of what somebody else does. On rural roads, particularly when you can't see over the rises, there's no berm over here, there's no escape. As you're approaching a rise you can't see over, slow down, cover your brake. You don't know what's right on the other side of that. So you've lost all visibility until you get there. It's sort of like driving in at dark, except it's light out. Even when you saw the shadows in those trees on that one road, where you're losing a lot of visibility, or vegetation, which right now is at its absolute peak. So you've got high vegetation right up to the side of the road. Damage right inside that vegetation. You know, another few months from now, that sort of dies down, and you can look through that field, it's going to be a little different. But right now, that's the condition. The other thing we get is this idea, I'm going to jump around a little bit, that somehow summer driving is safer than winter driving. Well, it's a little bit of a misconception. There, in fact, are more accidents in the winter months than there are in the summer months. However, there are a lot more fatalities in the summer months than in the winter months. So how does that make sense? More accidents in the winter, shouldn't there be more fatalities? Less accidents in the summer, more fatalities. Why? Speed. It's all about speed. As the speed increases, the likelihood of a bad result increases with it. Secondly, traffic. There's simply a lot more traffic in summer months than there are in winter months. It's interesting when you have a bad winter ice storm. You know, you might see lots of vehicles off the road, and people slid, people to death, but you'll see people, they're not hurt, or they're hurt in a very, very minor way. It might be damage to the vehicle. Right? Nobody, you'll see maybe on an icy day, you might see 10 cars off the road. Nobody's hurt. But in the summer, you only come upon one bad accident, and you see 5 ambulances there. That's usually an indicator. So, you know, what's the point is you've got to adjust to whatever the conditions are. If the conditions are rainy, you know, this type of thing, visibility is reduced, slow down. If those wipers come on, get those lights on, right? If it's foggy, right, the conditions are foggy or at night, again, slow down, adjust to the conditions. You're not going to lose your job because you're 10 minutes late getting back to the shop. I guarantee you that. You guys verify that? They're not losing their job for being 10 minutes late getting back to the shop because the weather changed. You don't have to, you know, keep that up. Be aware in summer driving that a lot of times, particularly in the day, if the sun begins to change, toward early morning if you're driving east, later in the day if you're driving west, the visibility, even on a beautiful cloudless day, can get very limited. Why? Just the sun, just the amount of sun that's hitting you. There might be times where you literally can't see in front of you because of the amount of sun. So we tend to get this false sense that oh, if the weather's good, then we can go faster. Not always, not always. And then finally, you know, this reacting to a skid, that's a little bit of a misconception. Again, be aware that with ABS brakes, there's not a lot of pumping of brakes like there used to be back when it was all hydraulic. It's much more about constant, steady pressure, but also remember in icy or snowy conditions that will come sooner or later, or even late fall, by the way, in fall when we get a lot of leaves and debris on the roads, and then rain in the afternoon, late day showers in the summer. Why are late day showers particularly dangerous? Late in the afternoon.
Only one word, oil to the car.
That's right, particularly in intersections. What happens is when people stop at an intersection, just little drops of oil, little drops of transmission fluid, those types of things. Over time, they get, oil has to come to the top. Oil and water doesn't mix, you've heard that. And then those intersections become very slippery. Lately in the afternoon, the road's been hot all day. The oil has pushed up to the top. Now it rains. They can be as slippery as ice in the middle of summer. If you get on a road after a hot day like today, and then a rainstorm like today. So keep that down. It always comes down to this. Simply slow down. I don't know how else to say it except to say you're not going to lose your job for being 10 minutes late. You got to get past it. You want to go home, you want to be safe, you want to enjoy your evening more than you want to get into that shop at 5:10. If you get there at 5:20, you'll still go home. Nighttime driving, I've touched on that pretty much already. The thing I want you to remember at night is about 80% of your peripheral vision is lost. So that means you can't see to your sides. So you can't see the animals in the field, you can't see the pedestrian with the dark shirt on, and that's why we see a disproportionate number of pedestrian strikes at night. Now, any of you who have kids or grandkids, and you're at their house, or they're at your house, and they're going out at night, and you look over and they got a black shirt on, or they want a towel. You don't change your shirt. Put a white shirt on. Put a light colored shirt on. Put an orange shirt on. I want people to see you. I want you to come home tonight. I'm serious about that. The data says if you're wearing dark clothes at night, the likelihood of you being hit increases substantially than if you're wearing light colored clothes. And, if you care about your kids or your grandkids, and I know you all do, it's okay to have those conversations. But guess what else you might want to do? Model the behavior you expect from them. Give some thought to that as well. But always remember, nighttime has special considerations. No, we cannot see as well at night as we do during the day. We were talking before about scanning 12 to 15 seconds ahead, 2 blocks ahead, a block and a half ahead in the city, out on the highway a quarter of a mile ahead. At night, you don't have those distances available. You can only see as far as your headlights take you. So you don't want to outdrive your headlights at night. Distracted driving. Even though we've touched on this before, I feel an obligation to touch on it again. What is distraction? Anything that takes your eyes off the road, that takes your hands off the steering wheel, or that takes your mind off of driving. Yes, cell phones are a big part of that. Because cell phones, in many ways, if you think about it, they do all three of them. If I look at a cell phone, I'm doing all three of these things simultaneously. I'm taking my eyes off the road, right? I'm taking at least one hand off of the wheel, and whatever I'm reading or paying attention to, I'm taking my mind off of driving. That's why these are so dangerous. But there's a lot of things that can cause this. There's a whole bunch of things. Even reaching over to do something proper, adjusting the temperature in a vehicle, right? Listening to the radio in a vehicle. Maybe even looking at my onboard GPS, right? Something that I'm using for a good reason still potentially causes these hazards. So when you have to do these things, not this, by the way, but those things, then slow down, increase your following distance, reduce your speed. That's how we prevent accidents. I'm going to show you a little video on distracted driving done by the University of South Florida in Tampa, and they sort of studied this idea of bus drivers and distractions and why people get into accidents. When I first turn this on, it's going to be very loud. I will shut it down in a minute. Just this.
Cell phone use and texting have played a role in numerous public transportation accidents. Between 2007 and 2009, 2 major accidents took place that involved operators who were using cell phones and texting while driving. These 2 incidents in California and Massachusetts resulted in the deaths of 25 people, injuries to hundreds, and extensive property damage. In May 2009, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority found it necessary to ban the operators of its trains, streetcars, and buses from using or carrying cell phones. This was in response to an incident in which an MBTA trolley operator ran a red light and hit another trolley, injuring 49 people. The trolley operator later admitted that he was sending a text message to his girlfriend at the time of the accident. In another recent incident, a San Antonio VIA Metropolitan Transit driver was caught on video driving through rush hour traffic while texting. The driver slammed into the back of a sports utility vehicle, injuring the vehicle's driver. The video shows the driver texting for almost 6 minutes prior to the crash. VIA reports that it recently fired 3 bus operators that were caught on video using their cell phones. One driver reportedly was caught texting at 5 different times during his route, and another was caught driving 65 miles an hour while texting. Numerous studies have shown that the use of cell phones by vehicle operators is a dangerous distraction that has resulted in many collisions, personal injuries, and deaths. In 2008, according to National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's Fatality Analysis Reporting System, distractions were involved in 5,870 fatality-related crashes, resulting in more than 515,000 people injured. It's tempting to want to send a text message or answer a phone call while driving your bus. But your choice to text or answer your phone while driving could result in permanent and disastrous consequences. Before you take your attention off the road, remember, operating a bus plus using a wireless device equals disaster. Distracted driving is any non-driving activity in which a person engages that has the potential to distract him or her from the primary task of driving and increases the risk of crashing. There are 3 types of distractions, any one of which can lead to an accident. Visual distractions are activities that cause a driver to take his eyes off the road. For example, answering a cell phone, reading a map, looking at a newspaper, looking at a GPS, etc. Manual distractions involve a driver removing his hands from the vehicle's steering wheel. For example, texting, tuning a radio or CD, applying makeup, shaving, etc. Cognitive distractions cause drivers to take their mind off the road. For example, using a hands-free or Bluetooth device, daydreaming, talking to passengers, etc. Studies have shown that talking on the phone or texting while driving can affect a driver's ability to the same extent as driving drunk. Talking on a cell phone is equivalent to driving with a 0.08% blood alcohol content level, which is considered legally drunk in most states. Driving while using a cell phone reduces the amount of brain activity associated with driving by 37%. Approximately 80% of all crashes and 65% of near crashes involve some type of distraction. Distracted driving-related crashes claimed 5,474 lives and led to 448,000 traffic injuries across the U.S. in 2009. Drivers who use handheld devices are 4 times more likely to get into crashes serious enough to injure themselves. A study by the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute determined how certain cell phone activities increase the risk of getting into an accident. It found that the manual use of cell phones, such as dialing and texting, leads to a substantial increase in the risk of being involved in a crash or near crash. The VPI study shows that a driver who reaches for an electronic device while operating a heavy vehicle is nearly 7 times more likely to be involved in a crash. And a driver dialing a cell phone is 6 times more likely to be involved in a crash. Text messaging was associated with the highest risk of all cell phone-related tasks. Texting while operating a heavy vehicle increases the operator's risk of a crash or a near crash by more than 23 times. Regardless of the type of distraction, driving while distracted is a serious threat to safety on the road. As bus operators, you are professionals on the road and have more driving experience than typical drivers. You are well versed in state and federal driving laws and are trained in defensive driving techniques. Common sense tells you that looking down to send a text or answer your cell phone is irresponsible, incredibly dangerous, against your agency's policy, and could cost you your job. Reggie Shaw was responsible for the deaths of 2 scientists as a result of texting in 2006. Shaw was a 19-year-old college student who was texting while driving his Chevy Tahoe to work.
A small sedan approached in the opposite direction, carrying 2 passengers who were prominent scientists on their way to ATK launch systems. While texting, Shaw crossed into the oncoming traffic and clipped the sedan, which spun out on the highway and was struck by a pickup that was carrying a 2-ton payload. The scientist died instantly. Shaw was charged and convicted and received 6 months in jail. As a result of this crash, new laws were enacted in Utah. Now, any driver who is convicted of this same offense could spend up to 15 years in jail. Safety is a transit system's #1 priority. It is important to remember that, as a professional bus operator, you are responsible for your safety and the safety of your passengers, other vehicles, pedestrians, and your transit agency's property. You should be familiar with your company's policy on wireless device use. Personal electronic devices such as cell phones, MP3 players, and video games should be turned off and stowed off the driver's person and out of sight while the bus is in operation. These devices should never be used while the vehicle is in motion. Use of these devices should be restricted to times when the vehicle is parked. Many other distractions can divert your attention away from safe driving and should not be conducted when your vehicle is in motion. Examples include eating or drinking, reading, completing paperwork, talking with passengers. Drivers should avoid unnecessary communications with passengers. Reading maps or instructions on how to perform your job duties, getting directions, using the radio or other equipment. Common sense and personal responsibility are a major part of the solution. It's up to each and every person to make sure they put it down and pay attention to the road. The risks are simply too high. Putting your cell phone down while driving will save lives and costs associated with crashes caused by distracted drivers. Since everyone is affected when drivers are distracted, everyone must be part of the solution. It only takes a fraction of a second to be distracted while driving, which can have permanent and irrevocable consequences. Don't get distracted or it could happen to you. Be professional, responsible, and safe. Don't use wireless technologies while operating a public transit vehicle.
Okay, we talked about that, we talked about it, we talked about it. The truth is, all those statistics you saw were from 2009, the video is getting a little old. Let me simply tell you, those numbers have doubled. Everything you just heard, doubled. It's not getting better. The problem was, these came out before the rules came out. I mean, that's just that simple. Some of you might remember bag phones. You might remember some of the first early generations of cell phones. In fact, they weren't even called cell phones, and they were called freedom phones. And originally, the only thing you could do on one was dial and pop, right? Flip phones, that type of thing. Did this change everything? This smartphone? Yeah, it did. It changed everything. Now we can text, tweet, type, surf, right? Watch movies, etc., etc., etc. And the problem is, most of the rules we wrote around this. We don't want you doing this. But I'm going to be honest with you. Here's what's happening. Because I see it all the time. People are still using it. But they're putting whether they're right to use them, or maybe they even have a monitor to the dash, because it's their GPS, right? The problem is, when this is my GPS, what else is happening on here? I got a map up here, right? But what happens when I get a text? It shows up, right? What happens when I get a phone call? It shows up. And there's going to be a real temptation to read that. Oh, I'm not using the phone. I'm not doing this. So again, all I can say to you is, you're a professional driver. And you heard that story about that gentleman, Reggie Shaw, who got 6 months in prison. And then you saw the laws change, and you now get up to 15 years. That has changed across the United States, including West Virginia. If you're involved in a fatality and they can connect it back to this, you could potentially serve 15 years in prison, because that's vehicular homicide. So could your family members. Go home and talk to your kids and your grandkids, because this is what they live on. And it doesn't change when they get in the vehicle. It really doesn't. My vehicle I got out there now, I plug this in, my dashboard now can do everything this can do. I can literally message, type, text, surf. So instead of, in my opinion, it being led, now I do use it for GPS. I do use it for map purposes. But the problem is it also gives me all that other information. And there's a real temptation. So I like that idea of changing, going back and relooking at that policy and making it a little simpler. Vehicle has to be in quiet.
or you can't look at this, and you can't use it. And I mean even look at it.
Now, easy for me to say, because you work in a very rural area. To some degree, this is your backup communication system. Am I right? This is, you don't always have cell service, or you don't always have the ability to use your two-way radio, which also has a certain amount of distraction to it. Always remember, your first obligation is the safety of what you're doing now. Your first obligation is not to answer something. So if that means that you have to make the left turn, pull over to a stationary position, now contact the office, then that's what it means. You're not going to lose your job for being 10 minutes late at the end of the day. What you might lose your job for is trying to do this and talk on this and get information while you're trying to make that left turn to hit a pedestrian. You might lose your job doing that. And I'm very serious about that. We have got to get this under control. And I'm not just talking about the men and women in this room. When you're driving home today, just pay attention to around you. And you all know what I'm talking about. You're going to see people coming at you. You're going to see people crossing that center line, going off of the net. That's all this. That's what this is. I just watched a woman, my wife and I were coming out of Highland Park, which is a park out by where we live. And you come out of this park to a stop sign, and it's a fairly busy road. It has a stop sign, and then traffic keeps moving the other direction. I watched this young woman go through that stop sign at 40 miles an hour. This is what I saw her doing while she went through it. She never even saw it. If a car would have been pulled, if we would have pulled out, we would have been T-boned. If a car would have been going the other direction, which has the right way to make a left turn, they would have been T-boned. And all it was her simply doing this. And I know that the men and women in this room aren't routinely doing what those folks are doing. But it's easy to kid yourself. Say, oh, I'm not using my phone. I'm just checking it. Well, when you're checking it, go back to this. Your eyes are off the road, your hands are off the steering wheel, and your mind is off the driving. And that's the conditions that cause accidents. So keep that in mind. Any thoughts about that? Anything anybody want to share about that? How do you think we're doing in the agency with this? Pretty good? Say yes, say no, say maybe. Yeah. Okay. One final thing I want to show you, and again, I show you these videos not because they're to make you feel bad. I show you these videos to remind you and to remind me that what we ask you men and women to do each and every day is difficult and potentially dangerous. Nothing I've said up here today, none of those people, these accidents that you've seen so far, got up that morning wanting to have that outcome. That guy that fell asleep and hit into the back of that vehicle and broke the back and the neck of a person didn't want to do that. That young man that blew through that stop sign and killed 20 people didn't want to do that. That young Reggie Shaw did not want to steer his car off and kill those two scientists. He didn't want to do that. And the gentleman you were about to meet didn't want to do it either. But what's the point of it? They didn't take the job at the time seriously enough. Maybe it's complacency. Maybe it's because they've done it 10,000 times before. But all it takes was one serious incident. And the other thing I've said to you is, unlike my job, it's not going to be in Florence paper, it's not going to be the lead story, but here's another example. This happens to be a school bus. I think every one of you will remember this story once you see it, but it involved a school bus in Chattanooga, Tennessee on a cold December morning, 2 years ago. Very routine. You know, typically what a bus does, any of you go school bus, you know this, twice a day you take the same kids to the same places. Boy, there's nothing, it's Groundhog Day out there. They sit in the same seats, they ask you the same questions. Those of you who drive over people experience this all the time. And it's very easy to get complacent until, again, everything lines up. And the next thing you know, on Good Morning America, you're the lead story.
That devastating bus crash in Tennessee. The school bus flipped on its side, hit trees, killing at least 5 young children. That bus driver now under arrest facing charges, and Amy is on the scene in Chattanooga with the latest. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, George. It is a devastating morning here in Chattanooga. The accident happened on this road right here behind me, just a few hundred feet up, around 3:20 yesterday afternoon, less than a mile from school. As you mentioned, 35 kids on that bus, and in addition to those who were killed, dozens of others were injured. And the posted speed limit on this road, 30 miles per hour. Federal investigators are now looking into whether excessive speed was a factor in this tragedy.
The bus is flipped over. It's occupied with children.
A bus full of children on their way home from elementary school runs off the road, slamming into these trees in a residential neighborhood.
I heard the crash, and we went outside to look, and we saw that the bus had hit a house across the street. They were escaping through the roof hatch.
Police believe excessive speed may have been a factor. They have charged the bus driver, 24-year-old Jonathan Walker, with 5 counts of vehicular homicide, reckless endangerment, and reckless driving.
We've received a search warrant, an executed search warrant for his blood. The investigation as it proceeds will let us know if there was any outside influences on his ability to drive a car, to drive a vehicle. We don't know at this time. What we do know now is that his behavior was to the point of recklessness, and it met the criteria for filing charges for vehicular homicide, reckless driving, and reckless endangerment.
At least 5 of the students dead and 24 others injured. As emergency personnel raced to the scene, families waited nervously to hear what happened to their children. The bus so mangled it took more than 2 hours to get the students to safety. The local hospital overwhelmed as ambulance after ambulance arrived.
Our thoughts and prayers are with their families, their schools, their friends, and our entire community impacted by this tragedy.
Hundreds gathered at area hospitals, standing in long lines to give blood.
This is an absolute nightmare, but I can assure you that the public safety professionals in Chattanooga are prepared and trained to make sure this is investigated thoroughly.
Authorities here planning to review the video from the school bus to figure out exactly what happened.
Now that's hard to watch. And again, I don't show up for the shock value, I show up for the reality. Again, some pictures are not going to
Start back. Nobody, you wouldn't even. I doubt he got out that morning. What do we know from this section? We know a few things. In fact, he was excessive speed. We also know, by the way, he wasn't under the influence of drugs and alcohol. We also know his cell phone wasn't involved. But we do know the one factor was excessive speed. And did you notice what the police officer said? He said because of his recklessness, we brought homicide charges against him. In other words, vehicular homicide. The vehicle becomes a weapon at that point. And so it's a whole other different set of categories. You are tried on a conviction. If you're convicted of homicide. Not a bad accident, you're convicted of homicide with all the repercussions that go with that. But then you think about the families involved. You think about the friends involved. You think about the loved ones involved. Again, what would that person do to go 15 miles an hour slower that morning? What would they, that afternoon? What would they do? And I don't think anybody in this room for a moment thinks, oh, they wouldn't do that. Of course they wouldn't do that. But that, men and women in this room, that's what we ask you to do each day. We ask you to do two things, or a few things. We ask you to come to work well rested, cool, calm, and in control. We ask you to have yourself under control each and every trip, each and every day. We ask you to do a good pre-trip inspection, as Doug mentioned earlier today. We ask you to drive defensively all day, every day, meaning to prevent accidents regardless of conditions or regardless of what's happening around you. We ask you to keep your own distractions under control. Not just the obvious distraction, the cell phone that's in your pocket, but also to keep the distractions of what's going on inside here. And we ask you to remember that you're never going to lose your job for being 10 minutes late. Whether it's backing up, whether it's driving a little bit faster, none of those things make sense when you're responsible for a difficult and dangerous job and elevating the lives and safety of others. So that completes the defensive driving portion. Is there anything anybody wants to talk about? Any questions, thoughts, concerns? We're not going to do an evaluation now. We're going to do it at the very end. Doug, Donnie, Suzanne, anybody want to add anything? Yes, sir.
I have a question about,
Listen
like I
up.
said, recklessness.
Yeah.
Could that be argued in court?
Oh,
You know, the objectiveness or subjectiveness of the word recklessness?
Sure, but this gentleman happens about that word. When the police officer said, you know, his behavior, that was the word he used, his behavior led to the possibility of recklessness. Okay, and that led to the possibility that a vehicular homicide. Of course it could be argued in court. In fact, it was. This gentleman ended up getting 5 years probation. I have to know the answer to that. He did spend about 9 months in jail, county jail, went to court, was let out, 5 years probation, 5 years of basically house arrest. So yes, they did argue that. But there was excessive speed involved. Yes, Doug.
I'm just going to say, it is so important to guys just to realize, and Michael, he hit on it, but I just want to reiterate, is if there is an incident, if there is an accident, we have a first thing they ask for, preventative maintenance. Let me have all your preventative maintenance things. Let me have all your pre-trips, all of your post-trips, and they go for weeks and weeks and weeks of this stuff, all right? So I'm just telling you, that's the first thing they go after. And they go over every one of them with a fine-tooth comb. I'm telling you. So I'm just reiterating, just make sure you're doing your pre-trips and post-trips. These things happen.
Well, Doug was on a very good point. What he was talking about was after an accident, the other side has a right, what they call discovery, to gather as much information as they can to frankly prove their side. And part of that information is maintenance records, part of that information is free trip, part of that information sometimes can be your personnel file, what your past history is. Remember that other accident when they said that first accident, the gentleman had 7 previous times that he was found that he was involved in minor accidents? Where do you think they got that information? So, yeah, Doug's right. And let me tell you, having been in court on a number of occasions trying to help the transit system put on the best case possible, there's a high-powered and a very skilled attorney on the other side trying to make you look like a fool.
And I always remember one time when I was under oath, and this attorney leans into me in a court case and he says, Mr. Noel, so you're an expert. You know, right off the bat, you know, okay, where are we going with this, right?
He says, let me ask you a simple question. Should we hire somebody who's safe or somebody who's less safe? Now, how do you answer that question? Do you hire somebody who's safe or somebody who's less safe? You better say safe, right? Now, I'm thinking as I'm saying that, he's not asking me the obvious question. He knows something we don't know. Do you know what he found out? This woman, this bus driver, was 39 years old that was involved in the accident. But when she was 17 years old, she lost her driver's license because she didn't have insurance. And they went back and found that record, and they were going to try to connect that activity as a 17-year-old to a right turn when she was 39 years old. That's how deep these folks will go. So, Doug, you're absolutely right. This gentleman here, by the way, did some research on the Chattanooga accident and found out, in fact, the cell phone was involved. So it was both speed and a cell phone that was involved in the gentleman that you saw in that last accident. But again, you're not doing any of this stuff to scare anybody in this room or even to make you feel bad. Why we're doing it is to make you remind yourself what you do each day is good. And so with that, I can see lunch is arriving. So here's what we'd like to do, with everybody's permission, is we'd like to keep lunch relatively short. I'm looking for my watch. There it is. It's 12 o'clock. We will start back up at 12:30. The earlier we start back up, the quicker we get shot. Everybody good with that? Okay, you're free. Go ahead.
Actually, we'll start with this room, this side of the room first. How's that? Ladies go first.